Extremes, the two ditches, left, right, conservative, liberal, progressive, traditional. Which camp should we as Christians be in? Plato said this many years ago in Greece: let him know how to choose the mean and avoid the extremes on either side as far as possible, for this is the way of happiness. Benjamin Franklin wrote at the beginning of our country, avoid extremes, forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. What does the Bible say? Should we go to extremes and take extreme positions? Morris so ably read, and I like that translation, Morris, that was a good one, Ecclesiastes 7, where Solomon said, do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes, according to the New International Version. You might be thinking, what, Pastor? Why are you talking to us about this? I mean, we're Seventh-day Adventists. We're radical for God. We stand up. We have end-time truth. You know, Laodicea, hot and cold. We want to be hot. So are you trying to temper our enthusiasm and get us to be these blasé, middle-of-the-road type Christians? Is that what you're doing this for? Next week, we're going to continue in Genesis, and we're going to look at what it means that God gave us dominion over the earth. Now, in evangelical circles right now, there's a lot of theology going around about what that means and how Christians should be not just active, but almost dominate in government. We're going to look at that. But as I got to thinking about that, and especially considering we're in the throes of an election cycle, and we're living in a society that unfortunately, probably because of social media, is becoming more and more polarized. More and more of us are having problems with posts on Facebook or on Instagram or articles that we're reading and friendships that are being severed and people that can't even talk about certain issues. And it comes into the church. And it comes down for each one of us to decide, where do I stand? Am I on the left? Am I on the right? Even theologically in our church, it's very easy to fall into one camp, theologically conservative or theologically liberal. And we toss these terms around, and some of us begin to identify with one or the other sides. I'm going to share a story with you today that is an extreme story. It is a story that ended up becoming the most interesting day of my life, probably, at least one of them. And it's going to hopefully illustrate a few points that I'll make at the end of the sermon. It's a rather long story, but I have to set it up because it was interesting to me. I hope it'll be interesting to you. We had just moved to the Republic of Georgia. The year was 2002. Georgia was still in a mess. Georgia had had two wars, one in Abkhazia, one in Ossetia. And Ossetia is a part of Georgia that's right along the Russian border, there on the Caucasus Mountains. And it was about an hour and a half from where I was living, in the capital city of Tbilisi. Well, if you look at a map, the Georgian map, to this day, it looks like Ossetia is part of Georgia. But no Georgian can go there because there was a war, and they won't even allow Georgians past the border. There's a road that goes up there into Russia, but a Georgian can't go through that border. So because I was the American and I could get up there, they said, hey, Doug, would you mind going and preaching from time to time and working with our Adventists in Ossetia? I said, yeah, sure. Well, I didn't realize it was a very dangerous territory because during the Soviet times, Joseph Stalin had mixed up the groups there, and Joseph Stalin was actually himself part Ossetian and part Georgian. And there were Georgian villages, and then an Ossetian, and then a Georgian Ossetian. And here are these people that really hate each other, and their villages are all mixed up, and it was really quite a crazy place. And I would have to call out there and say, hey, are they shooting each other? Are the partisans, firing at each other? No, Pastor, you can come out. So I would go out there. And we only had 7 or 8 Adventists at the time, probably in that region. And also, ADRA was working there, and my wife was working with ADRA. So the director of ADRA, who was a former student of my parents in Minnesota at the academy, we're also doing a project in Ossetia because not many other NGOs, non-government organizations, wanted to do anything there. So they were doing something, and one day he approached me and said, "Hey, Doug, we've got a couple missionaries there from Russia that have come down, and they've met some of our people, and they say they're Adventists. Would you go meet them?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went to meet them. It turns out the lady's name was Lena, and her son was Roma. And they had walked from near Moscow all the way down to Ossetia. Now, that may not mean much to you, but that would be like walking from about Chicago to Orlando. It's a long ways, about 1,000 miles as the crow flies, and I don't know how they came, and I don't even know how they got across the mountains, because the Caucasus Mountains are very steep, very few roads. If you look at Roman Empire, Greek Empire, they always stopped at the Caucasus because they're such a severe group of mountains. So I was like, wow, that's really interesting. They've walked here. So I went to meet them. I could tell they leaned very heavily, if you look at it in those terms, to the conservative side of things. But they said they felt called by God. They were coming here to the Caucasus to spread the gospel of Jesus, and they were going to help us. And I thought, well, hey, it's Ossetia. It's a difficult territory. Sure, why not? So I introduced them to some of our Adventists. They began to live in their homes, and they were out in a village about 7 or 8 miles out of the capital of Ossetia, Skinvali. And they were helping them work some and doing missionary work. Well, it turns out their missionary work was actually this. They would walk around town, and in a monotonous voice, she would say, "You will all burn in hell and die for eternity if you do not worship God on His holy seventh day." Just like that. No context, no friendships with anybody, no explanation, just this monotonous, you're all going to die if you don't worship on the Sabbath as the seventh day. Well, that didn't go over very well, as you can imagine, and some of their behavior was eccentric. I won't go into all of that. And finally, after about a month of this mission work, they called me up and they said, "Doug, can you please help us out? We've got to get rid of this lady somehow." All the people in the village are like, "Who are you guys? The Seventh-day Adventists? I mean, is this really what you all believe? Please, can you help do something?" I said, "Hey, yeah, okay." I said, "Get them somehow to Skinvali. I will come. I will personally pay for their bus tickets, get them from Skinvali back to Moscow, where Roma can get back in school, have a normal life." They'd been walking 18 months, where he can have a normal life and she can do her mission work somewhere there in Russia. So it turns out she thought Western transportation was a sin. So she was going to have transportation like Jesus had, like walking. So she ended up walking to Skinvali, which was only 7 or 8 miles, which, hey, after 1,000, what's 7 or 8 more? And this part of the story I don't even remember. Somehow we got them to Skinvali. And the other part of the story that you need to know is that Skinvali, because there are so few roads through the Caucasus, it's also a major drug trafficking route, from drugs going back and forth from Iran to Russia and into Turkey. So I knew that, and I was like, I do not want to be talking to this lady somewhere where it could look suspicious, so let's meet at the best place. I thought this was so clever, right in front of the police station. And we'll meet there, and so sure enough, they show up there. I took another one of my Ossetian Adventist friends who was actually living in Georgia at the time, and we drove up there. His name is Jambul, and we got there. I had the money in hand. I was going to convince Lena to get on the bus, take her son home, and just have a normal life in Russia instead of walking around the Caucasus and sharing this quote-unquote good news. So we get there, we start talking. She always called me Douglas. Douglas, I don't know. I can't. A bus is a Western form of transportation. That's not of God. It's a sin to get on a bus. So Lena, please, it's October. Winter's coming. You know what winter's like in Russia. Please just get your son home. You have your parents there. Please go and just give your son a decent life and get involved in the local church and help out there. But your time here has come to an end in Ossetia. We just can't have you here. I can't, Douglas. Well, why not? Well, they show movies on the bus. And you know what Ellen White says about, entertainment and youth and not being able to watch this. I say, you know what, Elena, just cover his eyes. It's 30-some hours or something. You can do something to just get him home. I mean, you can't walk. Winter's coming. It's not possible. It's 1,000 miles. You're not going to make it. Oh, I don't know. Let's have prayer. So we kneel down there right in front, the main highway there between Russia and part of Iran and Turkey and right across from the police station. We're kneeling, praying. No epiphany. We keep talking. Another hour and a half. Oh, let's pray again. No, please, God, please reveal to us if we should get on this. Well, I was hoping, I'd left about lunchtime. I was hoping to be home by supper after having given them the money for the tickets. No luck. Finally, it was like, Lena, what are you going to do? We'd already been talking 2.5 hours, and no epiphany was coming. And I said, I'm going to take you home, and you can figure out at my place what you're going to do, for the rest of your life. Well, I can't. Well, why not? Well, I'd have to ride with you in a car. I said, I don't care. I'm going to take you anyway. You're going to come with me to my house. Oh, I can't. Another 40 minutes. Let's have prayer. We're down on the ground again, kneeling, praying that God will reveal to her that if she can get in my car to go to my house, where she can, at least have a roof over her head. So finally, I don't even remember how, finally we basically just threw her in the car with Roma. And we took off driving. All of a sudden I hear, please don't rush to eternity. It's like, what are you talking about? You're going too fast. Your angels won't protect you if you're going this fast. So I'm going the speed limit. No, you can't go this fast. How fast can I go? 70 kilometers per hour. 70 kilometers, that's 42 miles per hour. That's absolutely terrifyingly dangerous in Georgia, where people drive 80 to 90 miles an hour in their big Mercedes and BMWs. This is dangerous, Lane. I can't do this. No, Douglas, your angels will not protect you. Okay, we'll go 42. So we're driving 42, just clogging up traffic. The other detail of this story was I had diplomatic plates through ADRA because my wife was working there. And the police at that time in Georgia really weren't looking for speeders. They were looking just for money. And they would just pull you over for no reason to beg. And sometimes I'd stop if I had an extra $5 in my pocket, which is like $2.50, and I'd just give it to them just for fun, without doing any traffic violations. But this time I was in no mood to stop. And so we were driving through Gori, Georgia, which is where Joseph Stalin was born. And there they have called a GAI station for all our Russian speakers here. You know what that is, where the police have this. They're not tricky there like they are here, where they hide behind a tree or something. There they just build a building, and they're just there. It's there. It's always there. You go by them. So I was in no mood to stop because we were going 42 miles an hour, and this hour-and-a-half trip was going to take at least 2.5 hours. So I was just going to whiz through the station, but this time I was met with 2 soldiers with AK-47s pointed right at my head. Okay, we're stopping, I guess. So pull over, roll down the window. Soldier walks up to me. Who are you? What are you doing? Oh, I'm an American, which usually got me out of a lot of stuff in Georgia because they really liked America. America was helping them against Russia. But this time it didn't help so much. He said, who are the people in the back seat? I said, well, you're not going to believe this if I tell you the whole story, but there are some of our friends from Russia and fellow church members. We've had some interesting discussions lately. And I'm taking them to my place. She's from Chechnya, isn't she? Now, for those of you who aren't from the former Soviet Union, Chechnya is the seat of radical Islamic terrorism. Almost all terrorist attacks in that part of the world are done by Chechens. Many of the generals of ISIS were Chechen. If anybody accuses you of aiding and abetting Chechens, you're in deep trouble. I said, no, she's not Chechen. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. She's not Chechen. Follow me. So all of a sudden, a big black BMW sedan pulls up with tinted windows. We're taking you to the KGB office. Okay, I guess we're going to the KGB. So we drive about a couple miles to the KGB office. They throw open the doors. We walk upstairs. And because it's a Chechen accusation, we're going to see the head of the KGB for that whole region of Georgia. He opens up the door. As a gentleman, I say to Lena, please go in. She said, Douglas, I cannot. I said, yes, you can. This is the KGB talking. You don't tell the KGB no. You're going in. Douglas, I cannot. Well, why not? Douglas, he has the TV on. And you know what Ellen White says about TV, entertainment for for Roma. Jambul, my Ossetian Adventist friend, took pity on her, and he approached the KGB head and said, yeah, I mean, you could just see the shame on his face. He was like, I'm really sorry, sir, but she believes that watching television is a sin. Would you mind turning off the TV? She won't come in otherwise. And the KGB agent turned out to be a very nice gentleman. He said, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so he flipped the TV off, and then Elena and Roma walked in. We sat down. They started interrogating us, trying to figure out what in the world is going on. I said, hey, guess what? So am I. So we're the two of us. And so we had a very nice talk, and the phone rang, and he looked at her, and he said, my phone's ringing. He said, can I answer that, or is that a sin too? And she's like, oh, no, yeah, okay, go ahead, answer the phone. So he answered the phone, and he said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to interrogate her. So they took her away, and they began to interrogate her. She was gone for about 2 hours. So Jambul and I just sat there on the couch. He started feeding us tea and, whatever else they do in the Caucasus there. And we actually had a nice talk. He was actually promoting our church. He said, why don't you guys build a school here? We could really use some good Western-style schools, and maybe your Seventh-day Adventist church could help us out. And I was like, man, how weird to come to the KGB office and actually have a better mission talk than with my fellow Adventists. So Lena was gone for a long time. Finally, they came back. She wasn't even with them, some of the KGB agents, and they said, sorry, sir, but we have to keep her overnight, and she's going to be in the jail because she actually has a passport from a country that ceased to exist over 10 years ago. I said, really? Well, yeah, she only has a Soviet Union passport. I said, she doesn't even have a Russian passport? I didn't even know that. I felt bad. No, we're going to have to keep her here. Well, there was a part of me that said, whew, I got delivered. But a part of me was like, no, how can I leave her here? I felt sorry for her. So, Lord helped me through this time. I was kind of praying, Lord, what should I do? So I pulled them aside. I said, can I just talk to you guys for just a minute? And I just said, I'm really concerned for her safety. Well, no, so don't worry about that. We'll take care of her. You can come back and pick her up in a couple days when we figure out what to do with her. I said, no, she's not quite balanced right now, and, she's, maybe could, and I remember they jumped to the conclusion, they did this. You mean because I still was learning Russian, wasn't quite fluent at the time, and I was like, we'll be right back. So they go off for about another half hour. They're, conferring on what to do. And they finally come back and they said, okay, sir, we'll let her go. We'll give her this piece of paper. You take care of her, but she has to tomorrow be at the Russian embassy to take care of her paperwork. And there's a note from the KGB that we've already interrogated her. She's not a terrorist threat, but she needs to get her passport done. I said, thank you so much, sir. So I walk out of there. It's about 10:30 at night by this time. Tanya was thinking, what in the world happened, that I was gone so long. So I called her. I said, honey, we're coming home. And I thought, man, now she's got to be grateful to me. I got her out of staying a couple nights in Georgian jail. And I told her, Lena, you were almost in big trouble. You need to take care of your passport. Now I'm going to take you home. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. So we get out on the road, and I start going the regular speed again. Douglas, please do not speed into eternity. And, please, 42 miles an hour again we're going. 11 o'clock at night. Nobody's on the road. I was saying, this has been the longest, worst day of my life. And we're about to Tbilisi. And she said, Douglas, where do you live? I said, well, we live on a mountain overlooking Tbilisi there. And Douglas, do we have to go through Tbilisi? I said, well, yes. Well, I cannot go with you then. I said, Lena, it's about midnight. You're going with me through Tbilisi. Well, no, Douglas, you know what Ellen White says about young people in cities, and I can't have my Roma going through Tbilisi, a big city like this, and it would be against counsel. I said, Lena, I'm done. We're going home. Cover his eyes. Put him on the back seat. Cover him with a blanket. I don't care what you do. We're going home. We got home at 1:30 in the morning. How do you think she reacted to me? Do you think she kind of came out of this funk with not looking at maybe Mrs. White's writings in their context, maybe analyzing her life to see if this was a balanced position to take for her son as she's dragging him literally around the Caucasus for 18 months, regimented prayer times for an hour, forcing her son on the ground for an hour at a time for about 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 5 o'clock, only eating basically green leaves off of plants. That was it, maybe some pasta. And we worked with them. I had some other Adventists staying with me. They were on the spectrum, theological spectrum. They were conservative, and Lena thought they were flaming liberals. And we labored with her. Lena, you need to think about this. Make a long story short, we basically got her paperwork taken care of, shoved her in the bus, and sent her back home to Russia. And finally, because guess what? Did she change her missionary method in my village where I was living? You will die for eternity in hell if you do not worship God on this holy seventh day. To all my neighbors. And my neighbors were coming to me, Doug, who is this person? And by the way, I ended up baptizing 5 or 6 of my neighbors that I was living by. But they were like, who is this lady? An extreme position, little context, out of balance. What lessons can we learn? Number 1, only God's mercy can lead us out of these situations. If you look at Romans 2, verse 4, it says, oh, do not despise God's mercy, for it is God's mercy that leads us to repentance. There were so many Adventists along her way that I could see how God was putting these people in her path to help her understand a greater depth of what the Adventist work is, what the work God is trying to do in the world. And believe it or not, a few years later, I was at Zauksky near Moscow, and I met Roma again, and I couldn't believe it. He was now about 19, 20 years old. I couldn't believe how normal he was. Sorry, I didn't do this for service. I'd prayed so many prayers for him. That God would help him understand what it's like to be part of a loving family. And instead, his mom was dragging him around, unbalanced, extreme positions, and yet I saw God's hand in bringing him around. He was amazingly normal, just a kid. I had such a good talk with him. I was so happy that it was God's overarching hand that helped bring him through that trial. God's mercy is the only thing that helps us in these situations, number 1. Number 2, a word of warning, though. It's not easy to get out of extreme thinking. Listen to Solomon. He says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, dishonor. But with humility comes wisdom. Is it easy to admit that we're wrong? Is it easy to say, you know what, maybe I should take a look at that. Maybe I should even look at what the other side is saying. I have this position. Is it easy to humble oneself and to get literature and start to read about it and try to understand where people that may even be saying bad things about you or your side of the debate? It's not. The human heart is not humbled easily. It's only by the grace of God that we are able, as a church, as followers of Jesus, to actually exemplify wisdom for the world and to humble oneself and to study. In fact, it's odd. If you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger Effect, anybody heard of that? Psychologists have actually found that people that know the least about a topic are tempted to think they know more about the topic than people that actually know more. They actually found that people who are at the top of their profession are usually some of the most humble people because they've studied, they've worked so hard, they've just exhausted their field, and they realize that there's so much more to know. Whereas if you just have a little bit of knowledge and you think you might know everything. In fact, George Burns, some of you remember him, he was a funny guy. He said this, too bad that all the people who know how to run our country are busy driving taxi cabs or cutting hair. It isn't until you actually come into power. You actually see it in political candidates. They say, well, we're going to do this and this, and then they get into power, and then they realize, man, they've got all these people and all these different sides to look at. And then they usually come a little bit more to the middle. And people on the sides, oh, they're just weak, they don't understand. But people that do understand realize that there's always room for growth. There's always room to understand more. In fact, as the famed philosopher Marty Mixon once said, the largest room in the world is the room for improvement. I think he got it from, what is it, one of your deans, Marty? I thought that was a great saying. Does there ever come a time when any one of us can say, well, I guess I know everything about everything there is in the world? No. There's always room for improvement. Number 3, when we have that attitude, take an extreme position, like I showed in the story, it is bad for the work of God. It reflects poorly not only on your own judgment, but on the judgment of the name who you take as your Savior and the church that you belong to. It was embarrassing to both Jambul and I before this very intelligent, by the way, the KGB attracts the most intelligent people, or some of the most intelligent people in the former Soviet Union. These guys aren't dumb. And when we went into that KGB office and we had to start to explain what we were doing with our church member, it was just almost flat out embarrassing. God blessed us, and we actually had a good conversation, like I said. But all the people in my village, all the people in that Ossetian village had to be put through this crazy teaching and way of presenting things. Now, some people might have the temptation to say, well, Pastor, maybe that was just God's warning to you. Maybe you should be more like that. Well, if you remember, if you look in Luke chapter 4, when Jesus was casting out demons, do you remember what the demons were saying? He's the Son of God. They were speaking truth. Well, this is great. Even Satan came over from the dark side to the right side, and he's going out and telling everybody, Jesus is the Son of God, and demons were proclaiming it. And what did Jesus tell the demons to do? Yeah, I don't want to say, shut up, Phyllis, but okay. Be quiet. Don't say anything, right? Why? Was it Satan's goal to give Jesus' work the feel of an extremist, crazy, fringe movement? That people, demon-possessed, going around, oh, Jesus is the Son of God. And so people are like, well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be a Christian. Could it be that Satan attempts to get us in the church into extreme positions so that we don't reflect fully the character of God and what God is trying to do in a healing ministry? Because I've been reading through the Gospels again, what was Jesus doing all the time? Healing people. They were coming to him for wholeness, to feel like they were complete again. It wasn't just some fringe movement. It was like drinking from a cistern, fresh water. Number 4, extremism destroys the human experience. Just think of it philosophically. Let's just pick on conservative and liberal. Conservatives usually look backwards, right? You're conserving. It's even in the term. You're conserving. So you conserve what was good, what was noble. Theologically, we look back to what our pioneers believed and everything that was happened 100 years ago. Politically, we look back to where the Constitution was set up. Well, that's good, right? Our pioneers probably did many things well. But liberals tend to look towards the future, and they're trying to figure out, and that's why we call them sometimes progressive. And just think about this. What if you solely identified with one camp, and you said, you know what, we've reached basically a utopian point, and now we just look backwards, and we just try to reach what they had back then? Well, that doesn't seem very wise, because can we improve on that? But what if you were just progressive and not conservative at all? And you went into, let's just say physics or studying astronomy, and you're like, who's that Newton guy? Or Kepler's laws? I don't need to know about that. I'll just look for something in the future. Well, that doesn't seem very wise either. And you might say, well, we didn't really come here to hear a philosophical discourse. No, you didn't. But let's listen to what Jesus says. Matthew 13, verse 52. Jesus said this, "Therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven," that is, teacher of law, there were a lot of Jewish teachers of the law, but this is a Jewish teacher of the law who's looking backwards at Moses, but also accepts Jesus in the kingdom of God, is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. So what does a righteous teacher do? A righteous teacher looks backwards and tries to find the true, what's good, what's honorable, but also pulls out new things as God continues to lead the church and the individual. That is, Jesus says we all should really be conservative liberals or liberal conservative. You can put whatever word you want in front of it. Why? Because that's part of the human experience. We grow. We grow in our understanding. We grow as a body. And we try to figure out what people did well before us, but we also try to understand the world is changing, and we try to see where God is moving us in the future. It's just part of being human. And if you take one or the other position, if you're just theologically conservative and that's it, or theologically liberal and that's it, and you don't worry about anything that happened in the past, Jesus says that's not being a teacher of righteousness who understands the kingdom of God and the law. Fifth thing, because invariably, when I give any type of sermon like this, some Adventists come up to me and say, well, Pastor, are you really trying to get us to be Laodicean? Jesus said, I wish you were hot or cold, and are you trying to get us to be lukewarm and be like right in the middle? So I feel like I have to talk about this a little bit, because let's go back to the Laodicean message. The Laodicean message is, you shouldn't be lukewarm. What does that mean? Well, let's look at Laodicea historically. Laodicea had perpetual water problems. Hierapolis was a town about 6-7 miles to the north of them, had hot springs. Sick people would go there. It's like hot tubs. They would sit in it. They would feel better. So Laodicea tried to get hot water. They tried to pipe it in. By the time it got there, it was lukewarm. No one wanted to sit in it. To the south, Colossae had cold springs, and people loved to go drink that cold water. They also tried to pipe that water into Laodicea. By the time it got to Laodicea, it was lukewarm. That is, it wasn't good for drinking. It wasn't good for sick people to sit in. That is, it was good for nothing. Now this goes along more with what Jesus says, because this is what Jesus says in John 15. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will become even more fruitful. So what is Laodicea talking about? Laodicea is talking about a church that says, we're a great church. We're so wealthy, we're great. That's what Laodicea is saying if you read Revelation 3. And Laodicea was wealthy. When they had an earthquake in 60 AD, they didn't even ask the Roman Empire to help them pay to rebuild the city. They had so much funds, they were just like, oh, we'll build it ourselves. So they really did have a lot of wealth. But when people came to them to get a drink or to get healed, they couldn't. Why? Because the water was just lukewarm. So Jesus is talking about functionality for the kingdom, talking about reaping fruit for God's kingdom, being reproducing disciples. And if we look at it in this context, if you look at what Solomon said in the Old Testament, he says, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Esteem her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. You see, what God is talking about is, I believe, what Solomon's talking about. Get understanding. It might cost you all you have. Try to figure it out. Is there something bothering you? Get a book on it. Read it. Is there something, a biblical question that's bothering you or you're thinking about? Dig into it. Start looking at what other churches teach, what our churches taught. Really find out what the Bible teaches. That is progress. You see, the way of moderation is actually the opposite of an easy path. It's actually the path of we need to exert some effort in this so that we don't get dragged off into one ditch or the other. In fact, this is what one of our pioneers, Ellen White, says. God desires men and women to think soberly and candidly. They are to ascend to a higher and still higher grade, commanding a wider and still wider horizon. Did you catch that? That is, God expects us to be growing in our understanding, growing in our search for truth. Looking unto Jesus, they are to be changed into his image, which leads us to our last point. Let's look at the cross. We'll just end on that. Because some people say, oh, Pastor, you're teaching the easy way. We're standing over here with this group, or we're standing over here with this group, and you're kind of like, in between. Jesus was brought before the Sanhedrin. Who was the Sanhedrin composed of? The Pharisees, the religious conservatives. They were the blue collar. They were the people's people. They were pious. They were trying to get their nation back to God. They were trying to save the Jewish nation. But they ganged up with the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees were the wealthy elite. They were more the religious liberals. But when faced with what to do with Jesus, they got rid of their differences and they came together. They said, as a Jewish nation, we need to do this to save the Jewish nation, because if we accept this man's teaching, we're not even going to be a nation. So they accepted nationalism in place of Jesus. And then, in order to get what they needed done, they went to secular power. You remember Pilate. And Pilate realized what was going on. He said, I realize they're just jealous of him. It's like, man, can't you guys go try him in your own court? Why are you bringing him into me? He had a secular mindset. I don't want to get involved in religious disputes. But he was weak in character, and they started to threaten him, and they started to politically, they knew the buttons they could push with him. And all of a sudden you have the religious liberals, the religious conservatives ganging up with the secular liberals. And they were all there at the cross. And they were the ones yelling at him. They were the ones mocking him. They were the ones spitting on him. They were the ones taunting him. If you're the king of the Jews, come down from there. And where were the people whose identity wasn't in religious conservatism or religious liberalism or in secular liberalism? Where were they? Most of them were hiding. There were only a very few there at the cross that were friends with the Son of God and realized that none of the group's identities were theirs and that they were Jesus and they would stand by him through thick or thin. And what was Jesus' message? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus loved all of them. Every last one. Conservative, liberal, didn't matter. He wanted them, each last one, to come to a knowledge of him, of what he was doing on their behalf to save them for eternity. It's not the easy path. It's the narrow path. Solomon says, do not be over-righteous, neither be over-wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over-wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes.